Hello everyone, welcome back to another exciting YouTube video. This one's about section 3.2, how China limits European contact. So once again, as we go through these, please fill out the answers to the questions in the guided reading that was provided for you. Okay, we're going to talk about two big dynasties in China today. The first one is about the Ming Dynasty, and from this map, you can see the area that the Ming Dynasty controlled. It's a lot of what is modern day China, but also some additions. If you look up in the northeast section there, a lot of what's up there is actually part of Russia today, but that area was controlled during the Ming period. So the first statement says the rulers of the Ming Dynasty drive out the Mongols and bring peace and prosperity to China. Okay, and the first question that we have here is, how did Hongwu bring stability to China? So that's a picture of good old Hongwu there. He's kind of an interesting guy. As you read in your textbook, he's actually the son of a farmer, a peasant farmer. He wasn't nobility, but he rose in the ranks of the rebellion against the Mongols. The Mongols ruled large parts of China and Asia and even parts of Europe, starting way back with Genghis Khan and spreading on to his descendants. So eventually, the Ming Dynasty, or the Hongwu and rebellions, fight against the Mongols and kind of kick them out. So there was a long period of fighting, and so Hongwu has to bring stability back to China after this rebellion succeeds against the Mongols. So first thing he did was drive out the Mongols, get rid of those, what a lot of the Chinese saw as foreign invaders from the north. The Mongols had been invading parts of China for centuries. It's part of why China wanted to build a great wall to its northern border to stop them from coming in. So that's the first step towards gaining stability. The next thing is he also made agricultural reforms. Remember, agriculture has to do with farming. I'm going to talk about what some of those reforms are on the next slide. Third thing he did was Hongwu brought back a lot of respect for some of the old traditions in China, particularly the Confucian beliefs and morals that a lot of people held dearly or had held dearly for a long time. Finally, another step that he did to bring prosperity and stability back to China was to restore the merit-based civil service exams. Now let me break this down for you, make sure you understand what this means. Civil service exam is basically if someone wants to be a judge or work in the government or do something along those lines, they have to take this test, right? And they have to pass the test in order to gain that position. Now, he restored what's called merit-based civil service exams. And if you achieve something on merit, it has to do with the work or the job that you did. And so what this means is, instead of someone giving a government position to the husband of their daughter or to an old friend who may not have been the best qualified or the smartest for the job, that's the way things had operated or would operate sometimes in China before this restoration. And when he brought this back, it had happened a long time ago, but then fell out of favor. When he brought back merit-based civil service exams, basically what that meant is that the smartest people, the ones that studied the hardest and had the best understanding, they were the ones that would get those positions. And when you have the smartest people making decisions, it's going to help you bring stability and prosperity back to China. Okay, the next question is, what were some of Hongwu's agricultural reforms? Well, first of all, he improved irrigation, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. That improvement in irrigation helped to increase rice production. More food means more peace and prosperity for the country, right? He also introduced fish farming and commercial crops such as sugar and cotton. When we say commercial crops, those are things that are grown, that are sold. The farmers don't necessarily use them to eat. They may use some of it, but they often grow that crop and sell it for money. Okay, so in terms of irrigation, now this is in Ming China in the picture here. This is actually Thailand. But this is a rice paddy, and this shows you very easily how important water is for rice production. There is dry rice production, but a lot of rice is grown in what's called a paddy. They flood an area. Right? And irrigation means they're channeling water from some other place and bringing it to that area. So if you improve irrigation, you can see how rice is obviously very dependent on water and irrigation. If you improve irrigation, that's an obvious way that you will increase your rice production. Okay, the next question says, why was only the government allowed to conduct foreign trade? For a long time, the Ming Dynasty was conducting trade with outside countries, sometimes on the other side of the world, and we'll study that a lot more. But eventually they turned inward, right? And they didn't want to trade with other people. So the question is why? Well, first of all, the main idea was to keep influence of outsiders to a minimum, otherwise known as they wanted to isolate themselves, right? The Chinese often thought of themselves as what they called the Middle Kingdom, as in China is the middle of the universe, not just the world, the universe. Everything revolves around China, and in a lot of ways they were right. They were technologically more developed. They had better philosophy, better products. In a lot of ways they were superior. And so part of this isolation is not just to keep outsiders from influencing their culture, but it's also about the idea that they're better than everyone anyway, and they don't want that influence of the petty other cultures into their society. So the next question is, how did foreign trade affect Ming China? So even though they tried to place restrictions on the trade, it still flourished up and down the Chinese coast. This is because the products were heavily valued in Europe and other parts. Remember, we kind of studied how the Europeans started venturing further and further by sea away from Europe to increase trade. This is a picture of a Ming vase. It's very expensive. It's a top-notch quality good that would be something that the Chinese merchants would want to trade even if they weren't supposed to. They would do it anyway. And the way they would do it is to smuggle these products. So smuggling means when you move something illegally from one country to another. And because it was illegal and against the law, a lot of people saw great profits at this idea. A lot of times when things are illegal, they're worth a lot of money. And so silver started pouring into Ming China as a result of this foreign trade that was happening even though it wasn't supposed to. Because that silver and gold was coming in, that means that commerce and manufacturing increased in China. So the making of this kind of pottery, or another good that was highly sought after was silk. There was a high demand for it, and people were willing to pay good silver for this because once they brought it back to their own country, they'd be able to sell it for a lot more. So as a result of this trade and this silver coming in, it increased commerce and manufacturing in China. And then finally, these traders that would come, guess what they would bring with them? Christianity, particularly missionaries trying to convert people, right? So that's a big thing that came from trade. Another kind of smaller idea is the idea of clocks. Clocks came from some of the Europeans that were trading with China. Okay, next we're going to talk about the Manchus, right? The heading for this section is the Manchus invade China and begin the Jing Dynasty. That Q isn't pronounced like a Q, it's pronounced like a CH, like the Jing Dynasty. So here you can see this is from 1820. This is what they expanded to at some point, but you can see this again covers a larger area than modern day China. You can see to the north of that red dotted line, parts of Mongolia were part of Jing China, and then a little bit more to the northeast as well, further up into where they now control territory. So how did the Manchu rulers gain the respect of Chinese people, right? You can see in the northeast is the region of China called Manchuria, right? And some people saw the Manchurians as kind of like these invaders, foreigners coming down to the rest of central and southern China. So they kind of had to gain their respect as they ruled over them. How did they do that? Well, first of all, they upheld China's traditional Confucian beliefs. You all may have studied Confucian beliefs before, but the Manchu rulers helped to uphold those traditions. They also made China's frontiers safe. They secured the border so they couldn't be invaded by other countries or other hordes, to make things safer for everyone. And then finally, they helped restore China's prosperity. It's a very similar pattern to what the Mings did in a lot of ways. The Manchu rulers did the same thing at the start of their rule over China. How are traditional styles reflected in Chinese culture? We're talking a little bit about the Manchu period here, right? The Jing period. Here you have a painting from a very famous Chinese work of literature called The Dream of the Red Chamber. This painting is by Sun Wen. And so this is going to go a little bit into Chinese arts and culture. First of all, art, right? As this painting kind of depicts, what the Chinese were valuing is not creativity, not creating something new, not something that uses a lot of imagination, but doing things the way Chinese had traditionally done and their technical skills. How well could they do those same sort of brush strokes or those same sort of classical Chinese settings? They're trying to imitate and create as perfect a copy as they can. Okay, so that's one example of how Chinese tradition was reflected in culture. And then another way is through plays. Now the plays kind of similar to the art. They weren't creating new characters. They weren't starting new kinds of plot lines and things like that. They were depicting traditional culture and traditional heroes. Okay, so those are two examples of how Chinese traditions were featured in their culture. The next question is, what restrictions did the Manchus place on foreign trade? Well, first of all, they restricted trading to certain ports, right? They wanted to make sure that it could only happen in certain places. They were kind of isolationists as well. Finally, they demanded tribute and kowtow rituals. Now, this is actually a picture of some Muslims praying, but this is the same idea of what a kowtow looks like. It's otherwise known as prostrating yourself. You put your head down on the ground, and that's what the Chinese rulers expected or demanded that their foreigners do. That the foreigners trying to trade do when they come and trade with them. Now, you can imagine some of the Europeans didn't like that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. They also demanded tribute. Tribute means that you have to pay them silver, usually some kind of gold or gifts, in order to get the privilege to trade with them. Remember, the Chinese saw themselves as the center of the universe, the Middle Kingdom. If you wanted to trade with that Middle Kingdom with superior products, you had to meet their demands. Last question, why did the Chinese accept the Dutch and reject the British as trading partners? Now, this is a little bit of a story, but it's pretty interesting, so please listen. Here you have a picture of Qianlong. He is the emperor during one of these kind of interactions that we're going to talk about here, right? So, the Dutch are allowed to trade with the Chinese because they follow the Chinese rules. They're willing to kowtow. They're willing to pay for all their goods in gold or silver. They're willing to pay tribute. They follow along with the regulations. They jump through the hoops that the Chinese demand. And here's an interesting picture. It looks like as though there's Chinese characters, but this is a Dutch ship indicating that this is one of the ships that was allowed into Chinese ports to trade. Well, the British weren't going to go that way. The British refused to kowtow. They said no way. They wanted special agreements to exchange British goods for Chinese goods. Instead of just paying gold or silver, they wanted to be able to trade their own goods. And I have a great picture caricature here. This is supposed to be Qianlong. Obviously, this is a British depiction of what happened. And here you have Lord Macartney, the guy who went to China to try to trade with the Chinese. He's got lots of different European products. He's offering Qianlong the letter from his own King George III. But the Chinese flat out reject the British. They say, no, we don't want your goods. We don't need your goods. Our stuff is superior. We want your money. You're not respecting our traditions. Some of you may kowtow, but not Lord Macartney, not the people that are supposed to. And so they were rejected. They were told that they wouldn't be able to trade with the Chinese because of their beliefs and because of their reply to the Chinese demands. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.